Hi again then guys, and welcome to another returning car review for the most recent DLC pack on Gran Turismo Sport. As many of the cars are returning vehicles, of course the primary purpose of these reviews isn't just looking at it from the point of view of a new car, but more so comparing it to its existing version or versions in the franchise. And as far as those models go, this is one of the slightly newer cars on Gran Turismo, the Ferrari F40. It hasn't been in the franchise for anywhere near as long as something like an RX-7 or an R34 Skyline. Now the car is a legend, of course. It marked Ferrari's 40th anniversary. It was the last car that Enzo himself had a hand in developing, and it's a car which a lot of people love. Many people would probably say that it's the best Ferrari ever made, from a supercar point of view at the very least. And although I can understand that, I totally get it. It is a very old school, back to basics, mechanical, analog supercar rather than a digital one, like a Porsche 959 is, for instance, one of its main rivals. This car's never really done it for me. I respect it in a similar way to a GTR. I see why people love it in a similar way to a Supra, but just like those two cars, I'm not the biggest of fans of it. I like them, but I don't love them. And that's the case for me with the F40 as well, especially given that on Gran Turismo 6, it's not really as strong as you might hope it would be, not just in a straight line, which is understandable, but more so around a track, because at the time of its release, the F40 was, if memory serves, faster than all of Ferrari's Grand Prix cars around their circuit at that point in time. Now, of course, it would be nowhere near them today, but back then it was. Again, you wouldn't expect it to beat modern supercars under all circumstances, but at the very least, given that most modern supercars would still have at least some level of trouble keeping up with even an older Grand Prix car around a technical circuit, you would assume that the F40 could be a little bit better than it is on Gran Turismo 6. It's not bad, it can certainly be used effectively, but it's not as mind-blowing as you might hope. Now, with that being said, the car has made a return. So what is it like now? Well, as with many of the cars on the game, especially the updated ones, the power isn't quite as high as it used to be. However, and this is where it gets interesting, the weight is actually lower than it used to be. Because now you can take the F40 under 1,000 kilos, which is less than a tonne. That's pretty cool. That means that the horsepower per tonne, even with stock power, immediately jumps right up to over 470. Now, with that being said, even if you don't tune this car, it still only weighs 1,100 kilos to begin with anyway, which means that the horsepower per tonne is 428 stock, thanks to having 471 horsepower. Now, it's only got a 2.9 litre engine. It is, of course, a turbo unit, puts out 425 pound-feet of torque, which, funnily enough, is actually a lot higher than many modern Ferraris to this day, thanks to the turbo aspiration in particular. And the thing that surprised me the most about this car, and it actually surprised me in a very good way, was the pricing. Because I thought, based on the Cobra in particular, a legendary classic car in the performance world, that they would probably bump up the price on the F40 as well, maybe to a similar level, 1.5 or even 2 million credits. That wouldn't have surprised me at all. So when I got on the game, downloaded the pack, and saw that this car was like the Skylines and the RX-7, the exact same price as it was on Gran Turismo 6, of 450 grand, I was actually impressed by that. Now, from one point of view, it's great, because it means it's more affordable, and you can get it pretty quickly. On the other hand, it does feel like kind of a disservice to how iconic the car is. That may sound like a weird argument, but I'm sure there are those of you who understand where I'm coming from. In a similar way to how if something like the 1886 patent motor wagon were to return to Gran Turismo, I would have no problem at all if that car cost 10 million or even 20 million credits. Because although, from a performance point of view, it's utterly useless, truly useless, it's such a cool collector's piece and has such historical significance that of course you would want it to be expensive. It's not like newbies need to buy the car anyway, because you're not going to win any races with it, so you might as well make it something that acts almost as an achievement in its own right. Likewise with the F40. Now, the F40 of course has far more racing use, and it's far more competitive in the N classes than a patent motor wagon would be, but at the same time, I think you can see where I'm coming from. This is a hugely iconic car for many reasons. We already touched on a couple. It was the last car that Enzo worked on. This was, and some people don't realise this, the first 200 mile per hour road car at 201 miles per hour, and even the F40 only beat that by 1 mile per hour when that one was released. And this was also the first production car to have a carbon fibre body. So the F40 is a very significant car from the performance world, and at the time it really was the Enzo of its generation, in as much as it had more Grand Prix technology than pretty much any other car you could buy, certainly more than any other Ferrari you could buy. So with all of that in mind, what kind of changes in terms of actual performance and driving feel has the F40 had, given that, as I said, I'm not a fan of it on GT6, but then again, I'm not a huge fan of the R32 either, but look how good that is now. Well, I'm happy to report once again, just like with the R32, R34 and RX-7, and doubtless more that I haven't driven yet, that this definitely feels better on Gran Turismo Sport, at least for me, and I'm sure for many of you guys as well, than it did on Gran Turismo 6. And in particular, it is of course down to the handling. On Gran Turismo 6, I generally drove the car in its fully tuned form, with over 750 horsepower. Now, of course, at that level, it's going to be twitchy, but even then, it just didn't feel that authentic. It wasn't about the car being slippery or twitchy, there was just something there which felt like it was a bit lacking to me. Almost like the car didn't have a soul, it didn't have any character, it just went around the track in a very almost mundane way, I have to say. And when you drive the car on GT Sport, I think you'll see why I say that. Because when you compare it now to how it felt on GT6, I would say it's a far better car. Now, the sound is far better, it really is a whole lot better. The visuals are already pretty good, actually, on Gran Turismo 6 for this car. It's a good-looking model, it's got one of the better detailed interiors, but nonetheless, the textures, the lighting are even better now. And so, of course, that adds to the overall flavour, the overall package of the car. But yeah, overall, it's definitely worth checking out, and that's it for this particular pick. So, I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.